Opening talk of the conference, and I'm going to talk about how the technologies of biology have evolved and how humans came to be, and then what's likely to happen further out in that sort of an abstract, distant view. And so about 4 billion years ago, life started on this planet, began on this planet, and with simple cells that evolved into more complicated cells over time. And about 2 billion years ago, the cells started collecting together to create multicellular organisms. And this has allowed more complex kinds of life to evolve. And about 500 million years ago, during the Cambrian explosion, eyes and brains were invented, which created an explosion in the diversity of different kinds of life with predators and prey and the ability to see each other and hunt each other and avoid getting hunted and so forth. And that created more complex life and more diversity and the beginning of intelligence added into life. And then about a couple million years ago, life forms began using tools. Beavers building dams or using sticks or bones or other things to hunt and survive, and that the use of intelligence and the use of tools is a relatively recent evolutionary step. And so what led to humans' technologies that differentiate humans from other kinds of creatures is one of the most important inventions of humans is grandmothers, basically. In that the individuals who live much longer than their reproductive fertility time, and that the information that they have, they convey to their grandchildren to help them survive better. And so this is memory and processing and information that helps the species survive. And other primates don't really have grandparents. They have most individuals are fertile until they die. The next important evolutionary step was control of fire, in that it allowed a kind of tool that could cook things and heat things, but it also was dual use in that it could burn villages and burn people, so it was both good and bad. But it improved the survival of humans being able to cook their food. And then the next major evolutionary invention is electricity, which is sort of controlled fire, but it's been the foundation for all kinds of important aspects of human society. And then the next step after that would possibly be artificial intelligence, which is smart electricity. And that it may be a new life form, or it may be a smarter internet, but it's something that is a profound new kind of technology. Maybe, as Sundar Pichai, who's the current CEO of Google, would say, as important for humanity as the invention of either electricity or fire, AI is. And so an example of unintended consequence roughly in this area is in the 50s and 60s, the CIA had a program called MKUltra, which was designed to use psychedelic compounds to control the behavior of individuals, like wipe out the memories of spies or control populations or radicals of one kind. And they did a series of experiments over a decade or so, trying to control the culture and control individuals, and eventually abandoned the project. But some of the subjects in the early experiments, Ken Kesey, for example, saw these psychedelic type of compounds as having a different purpose than population control. And the unintended consequence of this is it created the counterculture, or the psychedelic 60s, which was not the intention of what the CIA was trying to do, but almost the opposite, where instead of having cultural control, they had cultural revolution, in a sense. And so an immune response is something that comes from biology, and when organisms are simpler, single cells that are not in a multicellular organism, they have an immune system inside that defends the cell against viruses and other kinds of difficulties. And so the inside of the cell is sort of its private world, and it has its own immune system. But as soon as you get to a multicellular organism, the immune system has to deal with the behavior of individual cells, like a culture, in a sense. And so the immune system inside a cell is biochemical, and this is where CRISPR comes from. It's the way that the cell has memory to recognize invaders and chop them up if they come in. And so the evolution from single-cell organisms to multi-cell organisms creates a different dynamic for what immune systems do, which is to recognize when cells are behaving normally and when they're behaving abnormally, either because of an infection or parasite or because of something like a cancer that is causing it to grow improperly. And so this allows more complex organisms to grow and for them to regulate themselves and protect themselves as a multicellular complex organism, kind of like a society. And so when you look at humans, the density of humans is getting higher and higher in an exponential way. And the humans view themselves as having internal privacy and their internal survival instincts. But as a culture, an immune system is evolving for the species. And immune systems are not very kind or judicious, that if a cell is misbehaving in a multicellular organism, like turning into a cancer or infected with something, the immune system promptly kills it. It doesn't have much of a conversation about how the cell feels about being wiped out. And so as humans become more dense and more highly populated, it's becoming more like a multicellular organism, and the evolution of immune responses, such as China's social credit score or the US's credit score, are becoming ways that the society has an immune regulation of the individuals that some would say is invading their privacy, but others would say is a necessary element of the survival of the species. And this is something that's likely to have unintended consequences in that privacy goes away, and that what happens outside of a cell in a multicellular organism is essentially public information, and the immune system will evaluate that to say, well, can this cell be tolerated or should it be killed? And this can happen in a decentralized, distributed way, that the immune systems are authorized to kill in a decentralized way. And so some of the people arguing for a decentralized system is increasing more privacy and more security. It has an unintended consequence of a decentralized system which can act locally to decide to kill something that it views as somewhat different in behavior, and there isn't a central authority to appeal to. And so as you add AI to the population control and the capability to recognize what's conformant normal behavior and then what's aberrant such that the immune system will respond, that this is very sensitive to the algorithm that you use to say, well, this person is a terrorist, or this individual is the beginning of a cancer or an infection. And a decentralized, smart immune system will terminate the person. And this is a world that most people would say is a nightmare, but it's a very likely evolutionary step for people.